So don't forget to attend this class. The meeting link can be different. Before joining the class, just check your mails once. Okay? Yeah. So I guess Madhavi is not going to join today, and Harsha also is not going to join, I guess. Yeah. So let's start. Where did we stop? In the last class, we're going through sub-resource and sub-resource locators. Yes. Today, we'll talk about security, securing REST services. I'll show you basic authentication here. So yeah, we can secure this resource methods, RESTful resource methods. It is possible to secure them. Yeah. Now, when we talk about security, for security, you'll have two aspects. One is authentication, and the other one is, sorry, authorization. Okay. So we have to deal with these two things. See, what is authentication here? What do you people think? When I say authentication, what does it means? Yes, authentication means. So authentication is the process of validating the user or checking the user whether they checking the user who they claim to be. Yes. How through the credentials provided by the users. Okay. So we will be validating the user. We'll check the user who they claim to be through the credentials. So users will be supplying the credentials. By validating the credentials, we'll check whether the users are valid users or not, whether are they are who they claim to be. Yes, that is what we do with authentication. So how about authorization here? Authorization means authorization. It is used to check the privileges of the user. The user might be valid user, but you know what? Here, the user they may not be privileged to access a particular resource. The users may not be. They're not. They might. There might be some restrictions. Yes, the user might not be a privileged user. I can say yes. So to check whether user has got a privilege, has got privileges to access the resource or not, this process is actually authorization here. Yes, the authentication is the process of checking whether the user is who they claim to be by validating the credentials. Credentials means usernames and password. Okay. Now, authorization means the process of checking the privileges of the user or checking whether the user is privileged to access a resource or not. Resource in the sense here we're talking about methods. Okay, let's see how to work with the security now. So first of all, let's say what I want to do is I would like to secure a particular method of a resource method. Let me just open our workspace here. Just a minute. Okay, now here let's take this resource method here. Yeah, let's say I want to add a restriction. I mean, I would like to secure this method. Okay, I would like to secure this method here. So what to do? So we have some annotations which we can make use of. See, roles allowed. This is the annotation. So where is this annotation defined roles allowed? You know what? Here, the roles allowed annotation, you'll find that it is it is from your Java Enterprise Edition itself. Standard Java, you see, Java X dot annotation dot security. Okay, roles allowed. It's a standard annotation. It's not just specific to your JAX RS API. Now we can specify the details. Let's say I want the user whose role is admin to access this resource. You see this role name which you have defined here, role admin, it's user defined. It's not predefined. Okay, it's not predefined. It's just user defined here. Okay, yes. So now it indicates that here this method can be only accessed by the users whose role is admin. So that means whenever a a client places a request for this resource method, so along with that request, the client is supposed to provide the user credentials. Client is supposed to provide the user credentials, I can say. Yes. So username and password. So the credentials supplied by the user, the client, this application is supposed to validate them. this application here, it is supposed to validate them. Okay, so where you will, how the application will validate them? First of all, the application is supposed to authenticate the user, then authorize the user. So that credentials here, the application should have those credentials, and it should cross-check the credentials with the it should cross-check the user supplied credentials with the credentials which are already stored in the database. Okay, yes, I'll show you. Here we have a table called as users. Now this user table has got the columns like username, password, enable, whether user is active or not. Enable means whether user is active or not. If it is one, it is user is active. So if it is zero or negative value, user is inactive. That is what it indicates. Okay. Yes. Now, how about the role details? We don't see the role details here, right? Where are the role details here? You'll find that here the details about the role, they will be in a separate table. Okay. So we have a table called as roles, not roles. Actually, it is authorities. I'm sorry, authorities. So in the authorities table, we got this role user. You see, the username is a common column between these two tables, which associates these two tables. Username is a common column between these two tables, which associates these two tables. I can say. Okay. Yes. So in the users table, you'll find the username column. In the authorities table also, you'll have username column here, which is a common column. So for every user, you have a role configured. Okay. Yeah. So these are the tables. Fine. Now I'll show you how the user will be supplying that username and password. Okay. So from this file news is ARC client. Okay, advanced REST client here. Let's check this once. Here, what we'll do is actually we'll be following basic authentication model. So in basic authentication, what you will do is, uh, let's say you have some URL. Now you have to place the request for this method. You have to place the request for this method, add product method. So you got a URL for every method, you know that, right? So here also for this method you have a URL. So let me just copy that URL here. Just a second. Let me just deploy this application so that I will get the URL. So let me copy this URL. And then I'll paste it here. So let's say I want to place the request. But you see, I want to place the request for that method. Let's say which method, that add method. Okay. So, but this time that method is a secured method. So if it is a secured method, what we are supposed to do, we have to supply the credentials, username and password, right? We have to supply the credentials, username and password here. So how will you supply that credentials, that username and password? You see, the client, they can supply that username and password as a header. The client can add a header here. Yes, this is very important. As part of that HTTP request, the client will be placing a HTTP request to place the request, to send the request, right? To place the request for the resource method, for that web service method, it uses, it, it will construct a HTTP request, right? As part of this request, the client can add an authorization header. You have a header called as authorization header. Okay, this authorization header value will be, okay, this is a header, and this authorization header value it should be basic space username colon password, and that too they will be encoded. So this is how the client is supposed to construct a authorization header. This is how the client is supposed to construct a authorization header here. Yes. and it is supposed to send this header to the server as part of that request. So that on the server side, you see, this details will be used to validate that user, authorize the user, authenticate the user. Okay, that is how it works. Okay, so I'll show you here in the ARC client. You can add a header this way. Header, just make sure that so generally if you open the ARC, this is what you'll see. You have this parameters show panel, click on this down arrow, you have headers here, click on this headers tab, and you got this add header option here, click on add header. So you see, now you can add the header name. What is the header name? Authorization header. You see, if you type in the initial letters, you'll get it. AU. You got the header name. And what should be the header value? Yes, let's see. As I told you, authorization column basic space. Okay, it's just showing you the example. Now you have this edit option here. You see, open header editor. Click on this pen symbol which you see. Now it is asking you to provide the username and password. Okay, let's say the username is Harry and the password is Harry. Okay, and click on accept. Now have you noticed it? Now this is the value which you'll see. Basic space. You have some encoded text here. Yes, that username and password will be encoded. The username and password will be encoded. That is what happens. Okay. So this is how the credentials will be sent to the server when the request is placed for a resource method. Yes. Got it? So is it clear for everyone? Yes. How will you send that details? So this client will be adding this header, authorization header, to that request, HTTP request here. Okay. So I'm assuming that this is clear for you people. Now, you see, on the server side, we need to validate this, authenticate this credentials. Not only authenticating, but also authorize them. Yes. Not only authentication, but even authorization. So for that, you know what? We need to create a filter. We need to create a filter. Yes. First of all of you, is it clear? Can I have yes, please? So how this request is constructed to access a secured resource. So an authorization header has to be added to supply the credentials. The client is supposed to provide these details this way. The username and password is encoded. The username and password internally will be separated by colon. Yes. Okay, fine. So Now I'm going to add a filter. I'll create a package here first of all called as filter. So I have a predefined class. Sorry, I have a class already written for this authorization. Let me just make use of it. Yes. Okay. So just a second. Okay. You can see here in the filter also. And last stage. So first of all, I'll start with this user class. Okay, don't worry. First of all, you check this. You can ask me after going through this validation process. So I'll show you. So we have a user class. It's just a simple class. It has got the fields like username, password, and role details. You see, the properties are username, password, and role. So this user class will be used to store that user credentials which are fetched from the database, username and password and role. So as I told you people, so we have to cross check that user credentials with the credentials which are stored in the database server. So to fetch these credentials from the database server, so I'll be using a DO. If you can check this, user DO, um, which extends base DO. Base DO is just a class which provides the connection method to provide establish the connection. I mean, in the base DO you have a user-defined method called as getConnection. When it is called, it returns a connection object. So user DO uses base DO to obtain a connection, and then see this user DO class it implements this interface. The contract for the user DO is defined in this interface. It's just a simple interface. So we want our DO to implement this method. Yes. So we want our user DO class to implement this method. So which takes that username as input and returns that user object. It returns that user object. Yes. You know what? Here in this get username method, see, it interacts with the database server. This is the query which is executed. You'll find that on the database side, we got the credentials in two tables. In the users table, you have the username and password, and in the authorities table, you got role details. So we need both the details, right? We need both the details. Yes. Okay. So we need to write a join query to fetch the details from both the tables. Okay. So we need to fetch the username, password, as well as the role details of that user. Role details of the user. For that we have this join query. You see, select username dot password authority. Authority means the role. You see, a column name which holds that role details is called as authority here. So, so we are trying to fetch the username password u dot password u dot username a dot authority. You see, a u means it refers to the users table. It's the alias name for the users table. A refers to that authorities table here. Okay. See, from test dot users inner join authorities. We see we are joining those two tables, users table and authorities table, based on this condition username, where the username should be common. and we are fetching that record based on that particular username itself. Yes, that's it. That is the query which will be executed. So once you see how the query will be executed, I already we did discuss about JDBC a lot. So now once that query is executed, so you'll get that result set object. From the result set object, you'll read that username, password, and role details, and we are storing it into that user object. And this DO returns that user object. That's it. This is what the DO does. So what is the responsibility of the DO? The DO takes this username, the DO method which you got here, it takes that username, and it will provide it will fetch the credentials of that username of that user from the database server and stores them into a user object, and it returns that user object here. That's it. That is the responsibility of the user DO. It returns a user object which contains the user credentials of this username. Yeah. Okay. Fine. So this is just a general database access code which you're familiar with. It's not specific to REST services. Now here, this class is important. We have a class called as sample authentication filter. This is user defined class. We are making this class implements an interface, a predefined interface called as container request filter. Container request filter. So the container request filter, it is from JAX-RS API. Container request filter is from JAX-RS API. So basically, we are implementing a filter through this interface, container request filter. What is the responsibility of this filter? So filter will take that requests. Okay, filter will take the request and it will authenticate the user and authorize the user. It will authenticate the user and it will authorize the user. That is the responsibility of this filter. Yes. You see, in order to this filter, in order to authenticate and authorize the user, what exactly the filter needs? So filter needs that request information, right? In that request information, you'll have that credentials supplied by the user. So in the request, how that credentials are supplied, how the client is supplying the credentials as part of the request. Yes. As a header. Yes. As an authorization header. So this filter can read that authorization header. The filter should be able to read that authorization header. Yes. And okay, the filter is supposed to check whether the user is a valid user. Also, it has to authorize the user. To authorize the user, the filter needs the user details fetched from the database server, right? It will take the help of user DO for this purpose. Filter is going to take the help of the user DO to fetch that user details from the database server. Next, the filter, it also needs the information about the resource method info, for which the request is placed. So for which resource method the request is placed, the filter also needs the request information. Filter also needs the request. Filter also needs that request information here, the resource method details. Because on top of this method, resource method itself, the role details are configured, right? The filter should check this resource method roles allowed and to understand which users should be allowed to access this resource method. Okay? Yes. Which user should be allowed to access that resource. Okay. So these are the three things the filter needs. The request information provided by the client, the user DO object to interact with the database server to fetch that user details which are stored in the database server. And third thing, the resource method info for which the request is placed. Okay, yes. To understand what are the roles configured for that particular resource method, which users should be allowed to access that method. The details are needed. Yes. Okay. You see, to the filter, these details have to be provided. Have you noticed it? You got a reference, you got a property called as resource info declared here. Resource info is predefined type. You, okay, resource info is a predefined type. It is part of your JAX RX API. So, you know, what exactly you have in the resource info, you can check this. You see, resource info object, all of you, okay, concentrate. Don't think about anything else. Just check these details. Resource info object holds the resource method details for which the client has placed the request. As I told you people, the filter needs the resource method details to authenticate and authorize the user. So it should be able to understand, right, what roles are configured for that resource method. So you see this filter, it can fetch that resource method details. It can obtain that resource method details through this resource info object. Yes, through the resource info object, this filter fetch will be able to fetch the details about that resource method. Okay. Yes. Is it clear, all of you? I hope you people got it. So what is this resource info object? So you see on top of this property, that context annotation is added. So which indicates that the framework is supposed to supply this resource info object. Yes. The framework itself will inject or will supply the resource info object here. Okay. Yes. The framework itself will provide that resource info object. By the way, when I say resource method, what does that mean? When I say resource method, what does that mean? Resource method means web service method. Okay. Resource method means web service method. Okay. There is web service method here. Fine. Next, you see this filter, as I told you people, it also needs that user DO object to fetch that user credentials. It needs user DO object. Yes. So you got the user DO object. Next thing, what else is missing here? What else is needed for the filter? What else is needed for this filter? Yes. The filter needs request information as well. Request information. So how that request information is provided? So you see, you got this filter method in this class. Okay. Yes. You got the filter method which we have to override, and in this filter method itself, you'll write that authentication and authorization code. Okay. Here, the filter method, when it takes that request, it takes container request context object as input. That container request context object itself will provide that request information. Okay, it provides that request information, I can say. Yes. Now, you see, first of all, when this method will be called, the filter method, the filter method will be invoked. The filter method will be invoked whenever a client places a request. Okay, the name itself indicates, you see, it's a filter. That means it will intercept, it will filter that request, incoming request. Whenever a client places a request, you see, the framework will forward the request to this filter by calling this filter method. Yes. Okay. So when this method is called, now it is the responsibility of the filter to check the method details which the request is placed. So how will you fetch the details about the, how will you read the details about the method, you see, for which method the request is placed, for which method the request is placed here. You see, you will get those details this way from the resource info object as I told you people. You have to call this method get resource method, and this get resource method returns a method object which contains the details about the method for which the request is placed. Okay, yes. So you see, next thing we need to get that header from that request, right? The client will be sending the header. The client will be sending that header details. You see, we have to read that authorization header. So that is what I'm doing here. You see, through the request context object, we'll read that authorization header, I can say. Okay, we'll read the authorization header. Yes. So you'll get a map here, a map object, multi-valued map. It's a map itself. And you see, in that map, you'll find this key value pairs. So one of the key, it should be header. You'll get all the headers here. Okay, you'll have headers. Yes. So we are reading that authorization header and we are checking the values. You see, for a header, you can have multiple values also. For a header, you can have multiple values. Okay, you see, that's the reason why we'll use a list to store that headers associated to that authorization, values associated to that authorization header. You see, we are checking whether this authorization is null. That means whether user has provided any values or not. So see, if it is not, if it is equal to null or if it is empty, that means user didn't provide any authorization header here. That means user didn't provide any credentials. So if user didn't provide any credentials, then you know what, here user is not should not be allowed to access this resource. User should not be allowed to access this resource. You see, we simply construct a response. You see, request context dot about which you'll call this method and you'll send this response dot status dot unauthorized, and you can send a message also. You're not authorized to access this resource. You can send a message also that you're not authorized to access this resource. Okay. So this way you simply return the response. You see, you'll return the control also. You don't have anything here. That's it. That is what we'll be doing. If it is not null, that means if user has provided any value, then we'll read it. You see, it's a list now. Authorization is a list here. So I'll read the first value, get of 0, the first element from that list. We'll read the first element from the list here. Yes. Okay. And what we are doing, you see, we'll get a string, that whole basic, you see, this is a string which you'll get, as I told you people, that header value is this basic space username colon password, which is encoded. So now we want to remove this basic space. Okay. We want to just remove this basic space. So you see, that is what we are doing. We are reading that value, and you see, we are replace first. That means we are replacing that basic space with nothing. That's it. We are deleting it almost, I can say, from that string. So the rest of the string will be only username and password, which is encoded. Okay, the client will be encoding that username and password, and it will send it. So that username and password are encoded using base64 algorithm. Okay, you got that encoded username and password. So what we are doing is here, you see, we are using a class, predefined class called as base64. And in this base64 class, we got this decode method. You pass this string which contains that encoded username and password here. Okay, do this. So here, this decode method will take this text, this decode method here will take this text here. Yes, you'll get that plain text. Okay, it will decode that encoded text and returns the plain text, username and password. Now this username and password, you see, they're separated by colon. So we have to just delete, read this username and password separately. Okay. Yes, that is what you need to do here. So what you'll do for that, you see, we'll use the string tokenizer class. So you instantiate the string tokenizer class and pass the string which contains the username and password. Okay. And also the delimiter. So this username and password, how they are separated by colon, right? So now string tokenizer will divide that string based on the delimiter column. Okay, based on the delimiter column, it will divide the string, and you see, it, it will store that substrings which you got after the dividing as tokens. Okay, as tokens it will store them. Now here, you'll find that to read the tokens, you can call this method next token. Now how many tokens? You'll get two tokens. So basically, you're going to get two tokens here. Yes. So the two tokens, you can read them. First, call the next token method. It will return the first token. Again, call the next token method on the string tokenizer. It returns the second token. This way, you can take that username and password. I'm just displaying them here. You just check once. You need not display. Now we got that username and password. So what's the next thing we need to do here? You see, we have to validate the username and password, right? So first of all, here, now before I validate this username and password, I'm checking whether the requested method has got that roles allowed annotation or not. See, method, initially we have obtained a method object. See, this method object, it contains the details about the method for which the request is placed. The request is placed for which method, that method details are stored in this method object. Okay. So now on that method object, you see, with the help of that method object, we'll check whether this roles allowed annotation is present on that method or not. How? This way, you see, method object dot is annotation present. Call this method is annotation present and pass this name roles allowed. So it indicates that here we are checking whether that annotation roles allowed is there on top of that method or not. We are checking whether that annotation roles allowed is there on top of that method or not. Okay. Yes. So if it is available, that means the method is secured method, right? Now, so far what we did, we just read that username and password, right? And we are checking whether that annotation roles allowed is there or not. That means the method is secured method or not. If it is secured method, then we'll fetch that user details from the database server. We have already read that username, right? From the header, from the authorization header, we have read the username. Now, based on that username, we'll try to fetch the record of that user from the database server. We'll try to fetch the user details from the database server with the help of the DO. Now, DO will return a user object which contains username, password, and the role details from the database for this username, for the given username. So first of all, you see, we are checking whether that user is not null. If the user, if that get user method of the DO, if it returns null, that means the user is not existing. Okay. If that get user method returns null, that means that user is not existing. That user is not existing here. Okay. Yes. If it is not null, the user is existing. If the user is existing, now we'll cross check the password. So that user supplied password is stored in a variable. Just now we did that, right? It is in this variable. So we'll check it with the password fetched from the database. The password which is fetched from the database is in that user object. You see, on the user object, I'm calling with this method get password. So we are comparing these two passwords. They should match. Okay. If these two passwords are equal, then the user is a valid user. That means the user is authenticated successfully. We have done with the authentication. Next, we have to authorize the user. That means we have to check whether the user is privileged or not. The username and password is correct. Next, what I'll do is here, I'll get that annotation details, roles allowed annotation details. You see, in the roles allowed itself, we have this role name. What is it? Role admin. So we have to read this value here. So that is what we are doing. So first of all, we'll get that annotation details. So that annotation details, how will we get it? See, in the method object itself, we got this method called as get annotation. Pass that annotation, which annotation details you want, roles allowed annotation details. In that roles allowed, you have the role name configured. We'll get this object, roles allowed annotation object. Now, we'll read the values. When you call this value method, it returns a string array where the roles are configured. Now here, you see, I'm converting that string array to a list or set. I'm converting into a set here. Okay. And then after converting it to a set, we are searching whether the role is, we are searching whether that role is present or not. You see, what is the role of the user? Role admin. Now that user role, whether it matches the role configured on role configured or not. So the role configured is role admin. This role admin will be in the set. It should be in the list. It should be in that set. If that role admin matches this role of this user, then the user is valid. Then the user is valid, I can say. You see, why we are using an array here? You see, we have only configured one role, right? We didn't configure multiple roles, but it is possible to configure multiple roles for a user. Okay, sorry, for this method. So a role admin can access it, let's say, and a role manager can access it, let's say. So you have multiple roles configured. In that case, you see, in that case, you see here that roles will be stored into an array. Okay. So now this set contains that role details, role manager, role admin. You will have those details. Okay. Role manager, role admin. You will have those details. Now that user role which is fetched from the database, whether it matches that role configured on that method, we are checking it. If it matches, then user is authorized. We'll print this message. User is authorized. Else, you see, we'll return that response, unauthorized response here. We'll print a message. User is not authorized or you are not authorized. Yes, that is what we'll do. In this way, the response will be constructed. Even you see, if the password is incorrect, this else block will execute. The else block will execute. So we have some redundant code here constructing the response. We can avoid it. So I want you people to handle this. Okay, you know how to handle this. So this way you will authenticate and authorize the user. Okay, you'll be authenticating and authorizing the user here through this filter itself. But actually, this is a very low level API which you're using here, I can say. Nowadays, you have frameworks like Spring Security, which provides the support for handling this authentications and authorizations. We have OAuth also. So going forward in Spring, you'll find that you don't have to struggle much to write all this code. Okay, we can easily secure resources with the help of frameworks. So as of now, what we did here, is it clear? First of all, yes, I'll show you. We have to run this code, and once again I'll review this code, don't worry. But what we did here so far, is it clear? Any questions in this regard? So I will do one thing. I will share this code with you people. You have to go through this code, then only you'll understand. So once read it, and if you have any questions, do not hesitate and ask me. Okay. So in the next class, I'll run this code. In this class, I won't do that. So in the next class, I'll also show you how to access this REST service, secured service here through the ARC. Also, we'll write a Java application, a client application to access that resource, okay, secured resource. We'll do both. We'll see how to construct that authorization header, decode and encode that username and password from the client side and send it to the server. So we'll do all such things in the next class. I need one more class here to complete this stuff, and then we'll start with Spring. Okay? Yes. Fine. So I'll stop it here today. Let's meet tomorrow and we'll continue our discussion. Um, Tomorrow, in the sense, as I told you people, tomorrow morning we have this class. Which class? Your UI class. Again, our regular class will be on Monday at our regular time. Okay? There won't be any class tomorrow evening. So Saturday evening there won't be any class. Or let me do one thing. Saturday evening, at least let me complete the security part. I'll conduct a class Saturday evening. I'll complete the security. Let's have a class in the evening tomorrow, again at our regular time. And let me finish this part. Not at regular time. Just a minute, please. Here, we'll try to have a class at the rate 7 p.m. CST tomorrow. This will be just for 1 hour where I will talk about the security part. I'll complete the security part. Okay. That's it. Next, we'll meet on Monday at our regular time. Okay. Yes. That's it. Okay. So this class, second class will be for security. That's security. Okay. Please make a note of it. Okay. Next class again. The Sunday will be a break. Monday we'll have a class at our regular time. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Bye bye.
Do we have multi-threading class next?
Yes.